Chris Moulden has a track record of taking risks. Whether it's swimming in a Canadian lake that still has ice flow, diving in water so dark and murky he's practically blind, or teaching Marines how to escape from a rapidly sinking helicopter that's crashed into an ocean. Yeah, Chris is a risk taker. And that was a bit surprising for me to learn. But apparently for Chris, that's what makes him so good at what he does. Chris is the Corporate Safety Director at ARB, Primoris Services Corporation. And I suppose when you're a natural risk taker, it's easier to recognize the people on the job who may want to take the kind of risks or shortcuts that could lead to trouble. For Chris Moulden, safety is not just about the policies, processes, and regulations, but the choices an individual makes and the responsibilities they have towards their own safety and that of the rest of the organization.
First, I'm from Canada. I've been in the United States for 20 years. I've been with Primoris for going on 5 years now. I've been in safety at some capacity for close to 15 years of my life. And I guess relative to ARB and Primoris, I'm a senior safety director of ARB and some other segments within the business group. My primary responsibility is just to oversee the function and the performance of safety within all the different segments that I oversee. I have a staff of, it varies between 35 to 45 safety professionals in the field and administrative assistants. But I have a passion for safety, and it's something that seems to have come easy to me.
So you're a safety director today, but that's not how you started your career. You graduated from the College of Oceaneering and got your start as a commercial diver. What was that like?
The whole commercial diving experience was probably one of the highlights of my life. I know as a youngster growing up in Canada, a lot of my friends, including myself, have always dreamed of this commercial diving dream, but we had lived in landlocked area of Canada. And it wasn't until I moved out of Canada and got to see what the ocean looked like did I actually venture in on this commercial diving experience career. And it was very serendipitous. It happened, actually saw a commercial on TV in Long Beach, California, shortly thereafter, 9/11. And they were saying they needed some commercial divers. So I just thought, well, hey, didn't have the opportunity in Canada, so I'm going to do it here. So when I was in Long Beach, I decided to apply for it and went through the schooling. And it was trying. It pushed the envelope of my comfort zone, just working many different depths, most of the time zero visibility. Essentially, a commercial diver is a pipe fitter that works underwater. Of course, there's salvage diving and things of that nature too. But truly, you're an underwater construction worker is what it is for the most part. So it's just really exciting.
There's a pre-dive checklist that every diver is supposed to go through before jumping into the water. And is that where you first started thinking about safety?
Yeah, 100%. It was really easy transition from going to diving to the top side safety, because everything that has to do with anything under the water is first and foremost paramount about safety. It's all about checklists, redundancies in all different capacities, be it the actual machinery or be it the tools or the actual personnel who are watching the person who's diving.
Well, let's talk about helicopter underwater egress training. You actually taught people how to escape from a sinking helicopter, and at Camp Pendleton, no less. That's the Marines. So what was that about?
When I graduated from the College of Oceaneering, one of my instructors, Scott Cassell, he asked me if I was interested in, instead of going to the Gulf of Mexico and diving off of a rig, if I would be interested in seeing what it looks like to stay local and be subcontracted to the Marine Corps to be one of the advanced dive medics on this training operation that they had. And I said, sure. So Scott was an advanced dive medic, and so was I. And they needed another one. So I applied. I got the position as the medic on site, because you need a diving supervisor on any training operation that has to do with water within the military. So once I got hired, then they trained me up on how to be an instructor. And so for close to 5 years, spent most of my day upside down in a helicopter fuselage with a bunch of Marines that, quite frankly, aren't really comfortable in the water, or a lot of them weren't, So it was very rewarding. Up until that point of working with the military, I didn't have a lot of knowledge of really what went into doing what these fine young gentlemen and women do. But after seeing some repeat students that have actually been to the Iraq War and Afghanistan War and come back, I think that was probably the most moving part of what I did, was actually getting to see that what we trained these frequent flyers on what to do and how to get out of a helicopter, they were able to apply it when it did happen, because helicopters, I don't want to say frequently go down, but it's not uncommon for them to go down, particularly in that ship-to-shore movement that the military does.
Yeah, it's another example of really understanding what you're doing before you get into that situation. I was doing a little research on it, and what does it mean to find your reference points?
Saving yourself in a ditched helicopter that's in the water is all about conceptually, in other words, closing your eyes and understanding your environment without using your eyes. Very similar to what we train for as a commercial diver. When you're under the water, most of the time it's zero visibility, and it's all about visualizing in your mind where you're at so that you're aware of your space around you. So the physical reference points is so important in helicopter ditching, is because when a helicopter does hit the water, it's top heavy. It immediately rotates and flips upside down. So your mind gets tricked from your right is your left, your left is your right. So it's very important that when this does happen and you take that ditching mode, which is essentially sticking your head in between your legs and holding onto the bottom of your seat, is that when you do sit up, when the helicopter comes to rest, is that you always maintain a physical reference point so that you know your right hand is your right and your left hand is your left. And I know it might sound relatively simple, but when you're upside down and you have water rushing into your sinus cavities and burning your sinuses, and you're not already comfortable with the water and you can't see, you have to build the image in your mind, and then you have to navigate that image that you've created in your mind by utilizing your hands and keeping that positive physical reference on the helicopter until you find your egress point, be it a window or the actual rear of the aircraft.
The work you're doing at Primoris also deals with hazardous environments. Do you think some of those early skills you developed have translated into the role you do today?
I think the biggest thing that has translated to me is that every decision that we make, it doesn't just affect ourselves. There's a lot of indirect effects of our decisions, especially when something goes wrong. And that was most telling to me when I was working as a helicopter ditching survival instructor, when I did see those folks come back to the training, and I saw how it just going to war and some of them were injured and how that affected them. And I could only imagine how that affected their families and so forth. So for me, the biggest message that I was able to grab from that is that, we all come to work every day to make a couple bucks, but that couple bucks is all it is unless you utilize it towards something that's really valuable to you. And for the most part, that's usually our family and our friends. So if we don't cross our T's, dot our I's, and use a checklist or do things the way we know to do them, it's those folks, it's our family and our friends who are going to be affected the most. So I think that's probably one of the number one lessons I took away from that.
That's an important lesson to remember. Before Primoris, you were with Performance Mechanical, looked like for about 8 years. When I went on their website, I loved this statement that I found: mission first, people always. What did that mean in terms of how the company operated?
Well, I think PMI shares a similar philosophy with ARB. And this isn't PMI's, but this is ARB's token statement. And that is that no business objective is so important that it will be pursued at the sacrifice of safety. And PMI embodies that. They care for their people, just as ARB does. And it's evident on how they take care of their folks. And it's just a really important value for me because I am such a people person and I'm such a relationship person. And so PMI really embodied that, and so does ARB.
So how does that philosophy translate into a company's investment in time or people or resources directed towards safety?
Well, like the old saying says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And people can smell inauthenticity. And so I've been really fortunate. For the most part, everyone I've worked in and around have been very authentic in their approach with the people that we work with. And so when you show people that you care, they're interested in what you know, and therefore they perform the work well with quality and they do it safe.
I understand at Primoris, safety objectives and functions are ultimately established and managed by the senior management of the company. When you talked about their belief that no business objective is so important that it's ever pursued at the expense of safety, it demonstrates just how strategic safety is to your organization. So how does senior leadership at your company drive that point home across the entire organization?
Well, I think it's about being present. Our leadership has a huge focus on making sure that they're being seen, that they're not just about lip service, that they're also leading by example. And so what I really like about this company per se is that it's predicated on continuous improvement. Continuous improvement doesn't necessarily come from top management. However, top management has committed all the resources necessary to achieve an incident-free workplace. And so when we get suggestions from the field, be it your apprentice all the way to your journeymans, we weigh on those suggestions to see if they actually make an improvement to the process on how we do our work activities, and then we implement them as we feel fit. But there is a top-down leadership commitment for sure, and that really helps because it empowers everyone to make decisions based around the no business objective statement. As long as you're within those realms, and you will always be safe. But if you go outside of that, you won't be. So it's continuously communicated to everyone that safety is our top value, and each individual person is extremely valuable to this organization, and it doesn't exist without them.
When you first joined Primoris, what was the first thing you tackled?
Well, it was very calculated. My first assessment of the organization was there's a couple areas that could be organized a little bit better and be more efficient. My team that I inherited, they were absolutely outstanding. They bought into the ideas that were brought to the table. One of the things was just having a central database where all field professionals, including the safety staff, we have an area where the documents are controlled. So we very quickly procured our own server, which is coined the safety server. And that's where we have all of our health and safety management system and all the different relative documents to how we operate. And then once that was up and running, then what I did was I looked at the area that I was responsible for, and I needed to restructure. So what I ended up doing was cutting up the company into 3 regions, which were already existing on an operational perspective, but on a safety perspective, it was not. So I now have 3 leads in different regions of California. It's now a much more organizationally structured department that supports the field. And then one of the things I recognized too, it was around communication and how information was being relayed throughout the organization, particularly around incidents and memos and lessons learned and best practices. And then just overall, like, how are we keeping up with the safety performance of ARB, and how is that being communicated, and who knows about it, and when do they know about it? So when I saw that there was some need for improvement there, I made some suggestions and we implemented it pretty quickly to the point where, so once a month I meet, there's a calendared meeting for the next 27 years with all the presidents, and I meet with them and I give them a download on the performance of safety in their area. We talk about where we can continuously improve. We look at suggestions. We look at stuff like that.
I'm sort of picking up on a theme on your background and kind of the role that you're in now, that, real focus on methods and structure and repeatable processes. Is that really at the heart of how safety works?
I wouldn't say that's how the heart of how safety works. The heart of safety is exactly that. It's your heart. But like, without processes and policies and activities that can be duplicated in the way you want them, then you're kind of lost. So the policies and the processes and the regulations are absolutely necessary. But safety really, from my perspective, is an individual's responsibility and value, but it needs to also be bolstered by extreme commitment from leadership within that organization. But truly, safety is about your individual decision-making, your individual conscious decision-making.
How does having a safer work environment improve productivity?
Well, there are many different ways. If you're operating safer, the theory is that your quality will be safer, because if you're operating safely, that means you're being more methodical. If you're being more methodical, then you're going to deliver more quality. If you're going to deliver more quality, then you're going to be that means you're less rework. Less rework means less exposure, means better safety, which means you're more productive. More productive means you're making more. I mean, it just keeps going in circles and circles. So
that makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm wondering, when a company is bidding on a project, so whether it's your current company or just any company in general, if they're bidding on a project, how is their safety record part of the proposal? How does it impact the quote that they make for the work?
it depends on your client, and it depends on what area of construction you're in. I think certain areas of construction that's not weighted as much, like the residential construction world and probably the commercial construction world as well. In the industrial and heavy industrial and pipeline, it's very much weighted very, very highly. Most of the clients that we work with are very sophisticated, and they have very robust safety policies and procedures and expectations. And they want to work with businesses that have the same vision, same mission around safety, because it's important that we all go home safe. We all go home to our husbands and our wives and our kids. And so the way our clients weigh in on this is that if you have certain metrics such as your EMR or your total recordable incident rate or your lost time incident rate, if any of those are out of whack per your client's expected thresholds, then you don't even get the opportunity to bid it. So it can impact the livelihoods of everyone in your organization if the company is not operating safely, at least in the heavy industrial and pipeline world.
I can see how it would impact their decision-making. I'm curious if it impacts your decision-making. When you're procuring products or services from other companies, do you look at those companies' safety records?
Yes. So, we do multiple things, but we vet every subcontractor through a pretty extensive vetting process. And we're looking for commonalities, and obviously that lagging indicator metric of their EMR or their TRIR are important indicators to us. It tells me a couple of things. One, what was the severity of incidents in the past? And then two, based on the EMR and the TRIR, are they actually telling a story? And so if someone has a low EMR but has a high TRIR, it tells me that they don't have a very sophisticated safety department. They're not fully understanding on how to manage incidents per the regulation. And if they have a high EMR and a low TRIR, that tells me that the organization is probably burying some incidents, and we probably don't want to work with that organization.
The corporate safety function seems to be front and center of everything that Primoris does. Safety is even touted as a top reason that customers choose to work with you because of the value your safety record delivers. So what advice would you give to your counterpart in a completely different industry to help elevate the safety function in their organization?
It really all depends on what their executives value and what they don't. If I was speaking to an executive, I would speak to them in probably the terms that they would understand. So I would valueize what worth safety can bring to the table. Because sometimes executives can't see how that equates to either saving money or making money. And a lot of times it can, particularly when you're, like I illustrated earlier, when you're safe, you're usually more methodical, which leads to more quality, which leads to more production.
A few years ago, you won Safety Director of the Year. How did that feel?
It felt great. I actually won it this year too. So,
oh, congratulations.
Thank you. No, it's unbelievable. With considering that the people who are voting on that are all my peers in the industry that work in the same industry, it's very humbling. I can tell you that. And I can also tell you that this award is not, I do not deserve this by myself. This is what happens when you put together a world-class safety team and they all drive it. They all drive it. And this is what's possible when you have an executive leadership team that's fully bought in and they don't just discount safety, and it's just not just a bid item or bid line item. Like, there's some serious commitment to the safety performance in that company. So it feels good to be the recipient of it, but I hesitate to say that I am the one solely to be deserving of this. This is a team.
Growing up in Canada, what part of Canada?
So I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is landlocked.
Mm-hmm. I did not see the ocean until I was 18 years old. When I was 18, it might have even been 17, a friend of mine and myself, we went to Cancun just for a trip. And then shortly thereafter, my cousin, myself, and another friend, we moved to the Cayman Islands, and we lived in the Cayman Islands for a year. And from there, I met someone who then took me to California, and the rest is history. I went to school here, and I'm now married to my beautiful wife. Her name's Michelle, and we live in Southern California.
I mean, were you the kid that was climbing trees and not paying and taking risks? Or because you would have to be to go from, I haven't seen the ocean to I want to be a commercial diver and you can't see anything.
Yeah, I do. So there's something, tip of the spear trend that you're going to start seeing if you haven't already seen. It's called human operational performance. The whole idea behind it is that workers don't cause failures. Workers simply trigger latent conditions that lie dormant in organizations waiting for specific moments in time to take place. And so if you can embody that mindset, then all of a sudden the blame is not on the individual. The blame is on how did we fail this employee?
That was my conversation with Chris Moulden. Years ago, when he was teaching Marines how to escape a sinking helicopter, he taught his students about reference points. As he explained it, a reference point keeps you oriented, keeps you knowing when left is left and right is right. It's an image you build in your mind of where you want to go, no matter the distractions or obstacles in your way. I think he's approached his safety career with that same mindset. Today, Chris and his award-winning team are delivering the kind of safety record that returns real value for his company and their customers. Their reference point, that everyone goes home safe every night, remains the focus of their success. This is Kathleen Finato from TRUCE Software. Join me again as I talk to safety leaders across a wide range of industries to understand how what drives them in their field is also driving the success of their companies. It's no accident.